Audrey Miller.
Here.
Division 5, Robert Harris. Division 4, Justin Lane.
Here.
Division 3, Frank Donato.
Here.
Division 2, Keith Dice.
Here.
Division 1, Shelley Sourcewell.
Thank you. Item 4, adoption of the agenda. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
I move we adopt the agenda.
I'll second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Item 5, public comments. If anybody in the audience would like to address the board on any item that is not on the agenda, please feel free to do so now. Item 6A, High Desert Waterbank and Waterbank Resources Committee. Dwayne, or you mentioned?
Actually, Matt Knudsen will be making this report.
Matt?
Good evening. Included in your board packet, again on page 5, is the staff report for this item. And this evening, we're going to be considering a professional services agreement with Stantec in the not to exceed amount of $3,257,553 for engineering, design, and hydrogeology services associated with High Desert Waterbank. But maybe before we get into that, we have a presentation that we put together that can be used as the project develops over time, and it's a good template to update the board on a monthly basis as to the activity associated with this project. So maybe if we could first go through the presentation. Within the presentation, we have the details on the process we went through in making our recommendation this evening, and be happy to answer any questions. Feel free to stop me as we go through the presentation. So the first section of the presentation is just to remind everybody the purpose of the project and the objectives. Obviously, as you know, we're developing the High Desert Water Bank to improve the reliability of state water project water deliveries and Avek's financial stability. The project will have the capability to recharge up to 70,000 acre feet per year and recover up to 70,000 acre feet per year, with a total storage capacity of approximately 280,000 acre feet with a 10% loss. As you know, we've entered into a contract, an agreement with Metropolitan Water District to serve as our project partner on this project, and so we're pretty excited about it. You have an exhibit up there. I think you've all seen that. That's just a schematic from the early planning stages that shows the location of the project, but just to remind everybody, this is out near between 280th Street West and 300th Street West, just north of the California Aqueduct and south of the county line at Avenue A. So this section is to really just keep tabs on the overall program management for High Desert Water Bank. So you can see on this little reporting structure, we have Avek at the top. We have our project partner, Metropolitan Water District, on the left. We have an agreement with them. Kennedy Jenks, as you know, is serving as the agency's program management for this project, all the way from design through construction, and they're currently under contract. Mr. Paul Chow is here from Kennedy Jenks as well. We're going to be talking tonight about the engineering, design, and hydrogeology services. So if we make a decision, we'll have a contract with Stantec on that. Legal is handling most of the contract review as well as the land acquisition. And then in the future, once the project gets underway, we'll have various construction contracts as well as construction management contracts. And then on the left there, you can see recent program management activity. As you know, we have our agreement with Metropolitan has been fully executed. We're continuing with the land acquisition for the project. We've established our capital program account with Wells Fargo to keep the funding separate from our general fund. And then early February, we received 2 payments from Metropolitan totaling $13.3 million. $8.3 million was to reimburse us for expenses through June of last year. That's when we finalized the agreement. And then $5 million was working capital for the agency as we move forward. And then we did receive 5 proposals for the engineering services. On the right is just to highlight what some of the upcoming board decisions are. Tonight we have consideration of awarding the contract for engineering design and hydrogeology services. And then we're continuing with negotiations and purchases of the remaining parcels of land within the project boundary. So tonight's focus is really on the engineering, and we'll get into a little more detail in this section. This covers engineering and field work. So as I mentioned, we put out an RFP last fall. We received 5 very good proposals from 5 large engineering firms that are listed there: AECOM, Prolo, GHD, Provost and Pritchard, and Stantec. And then each of them had sub-consultants that really focused on the hydrogeology. And those sub-consultant firms are listed there. And the proposal fee as listed in the proposal, you can see range from about $2.2 million up to about $5.5 million. So a pretty big swing on the fee of those 5 proposals. So both staff and KJ reviewed those written proposals. It was our goal all along to shortlist that. The proposals down to 2 or 3 that we would invite back for interviews with KJ and staff. So we did that. We chose AECOM, Prolo, and Stantec. Each of those firms came in and met with staff, and Kennedy Jensen went through a series of questions that we had for them, and it was an opportunity for us to meet their team. They provided a presentation to give an overall project approach on this project, and it was a good process. So based on that process, and as well as their written proposal, staff recommended to the High Desert Waterbank Committee that we start negotiating with Stantec as a selected firm. The committee supported that process and recommendation. You can see there are a list of bullet points that kind of highlight why we were recommending Stantec. But just to hit on a few, they had a very strong team leadership. It's a very seasoned team that's accustomed to interaction with decision makers. They have a lot of experience for on equivalent projects such as the Coachella and semi-tropic projects that are up and running and serving those agencies that built those well. They also brought a lot of innovation in the planning side regarding, idea of looking at canals versus conveyance pipeline for the raw water being delivered throughout the project. They also brought the idea of going straight to a 30% design versus doing a 10% design, which was included in the RFP. They also brought some innovative ideas on developing 3 groundwater wells early on, full-scale wells that would help with the hydrogeology work. They bring a lot of experience with turnout design with DWR. Mark Anderson, a former DWR employee, can really help with this process, we think. And project team leadership is most seasoned and experienced in groundwater banking, hydrogeology, and infrastructure design of all the proposals received. So those are kind of the key points that stood out based on their proposal and interview. And as I mentioned, the committee supported our recommendation. Their original fee, first in the proposal, was $4.13 million from Stantec. So through the negotiations of fine-tuning the scope and schedule, with assistance from Kennedy Jenks, we were able to get that fee down to $3.257 million. So you can see that in the second paragraph there. Roughly $872,000 less than the original proposal, and also reduced overall project schedule for their scope from 40 months to 33 months. And not only were we able to reduce the fee, but we also feel we've got some added benefit in the refined scope, which we feel justifies a roughly $500,000 difference between their proposal and fee and the second lowest, or the next lowest proposal, which was Cololo Engineers. So we feel that they have a more robust field exploration program. I mentioned the 3 full-scale wells. They're going to design and oversee the construction of that. The actual construction work will be, the agency will be responsible for that cost, but all of the design and oversight is in Stantec's proposal or scope. More robust permitting and coordinating. So this scope wasn't included in the original RFP, who actually added this to their scope. So they're gonna include all of the permitting and coordinating with DWR and Southern California Edison, because we feel it's important to engage those two agencies early on to make sure there's no long-term delays in the project. I mentioned earlier that they're going to develop a 30% master plan design versus a 10% design, so that's added benefit. They're going to bring some innovative conveyance ideas based on other projects and experiences they have. And it's more robust recharge berm design through stormwater flooding. So I think they were the only firm through their proposal and interview that they really focused on the impact of potential flooding out there. 100-year flood across the property. They're taking that into account and will really evaluate that process, or that impact, potential impact into the design.
Is that in a floodplain area?
It is it's within, would you call it floodplain?
It's in an unmapped area, but it's been identified as within the floodplain for the 100-year floodplain.
And it's more robust geotechnical investigation to make sure we don't deal with collapsing soils as we experienced on our east side Waterbank. So maybe before I move on to that, I probably should introduce Joe Long, who's the project manager for Stantec. He'll be the one leading the team. A couple other key members of their team are Victor Harris, who's going to serve as the lead hydrogeologist. Many years of experience, including work with the Stockdale East Waterbank recharge project, did some work up in Fresno, has done work with Metropolitan Water District on joint groundwater replenishment feasibility study work, as well as the Imperial Irrigation District on their groundwater storage and recovery project. Another key member of their team is Wayne Dahl. Brings a lot of experience from Coachella Valley Water District on the Whitewater groundwater replenishment facility, as well as the Coachella Valley Water District projects. And he's also been involved in State Water Contractors East Branch enlargement evaluation. So any questions on that section, the engineering, before we move on?
No, go ahead. I'll have those. That's good.
We're going to kind of switch gears from engineering, but we'll get back to what the recommendation is.
Okay, so basically, we're going to discuss, they work well with, they've done things with Metropolitan.
Correct.
And that was one thing that the committee wanted to make sure that, since we're partnering with the funding and everything, that would not have an issue with that.
Yeah, Stantec has done a lot of work with Metropolitan Water District. We're currently working with them on some projects. Through the evaluation process, KJ and staff checked some of their references. All their references were excellent. So overall, I think we have a really good selected firm. They did a great job for us. So this section 4, moving away from engineering, this is where we'll update the board on a monthly basis of construction activity once that gets going. The budget, I know it's kind of small, hopefully you can see it here on your screen, but as you know, we have a $131 million budget with Metropolitan Water District under our agreement. So we've divvied that $131 million up into the various program components. And they're all listed there on the left-hand side with a brief description on the third column over. And then the budget allocation is listed there. And as you can see, between the hydrogeology and geotechnical and the project engineering and design, we have roughly $5.2 million budgeted within our budget allocation for design services. And just to refresh memory, the proposed fee with Stantec is $3.2 million, $3.25. See that there in the middle? So we are within the program budget for design. There will be some later design services that will come once we've gone through the hydrogeology investigation and the initial stages of the design. So their fee does not include the design of all of the recovery wells. that will come at a later task and approval process. But we feel pretty confident where we're at today versus what we have budgeted for design services. This will be just a graph that we can, or a chart that we can update on a monthly basis, give the board a snapshot as to how we're tracking of that 131 million. You can see down towards the bottom, there's about 102 million budgeted for construction, and we've spent just under 9 million total. And most of that, if not all of it, is related to land and legal expenses associated with land acquisition. Next section, under contracts, we currently only have one contract, that's with Kennedy Jenks for program management, 1.2 million, 1.3 million. This will be where we can track the expenses to date. As you can see, we've paid out 147 million to date of that 1.27 million contract. And then down below that is a chart that we can track the contributions by Metropolitan Water District into our capital program account. You can see they've contributed just over 13 million, 13.3 million. We've reimbursed ourselves that third and fourth line, which is 8.319 million, as well as another 1.23 million. Both those expenses came back to the agency. And then in the month of February, we expensed about $447,000. Most of that was associated with land acquisition. So this is, again, is just a snapshot to show how we're tracking with the contributions by Metropolitan. And then this is just a rough schedule as to completed tasks and some short-term upcoming tasks. Next month, we'll update this to include some of the activity associated with the Stantec contract, but it just shows the board kind of how the project is evolving over time, and then give the board a snapshot as to what's coming up in the future. And then this will be an area that we'll save for areas of concern. If there's things that are going sideways with the project, or things that we need to update the board on that we need maybe to correct, that's where we'll do it. And then back to our recommendation this evening, both staff and the committee are recommending that the board approve a professional services agreement, which includes scope of work, fee, and project schedule with Stantec, and then not to exceed amount of $3,257,553, and authorize the general manager to execute that contract. So, back to your board packet. I mentioned there was a staff report on page 5 and 6. And then again, on page 7 of your packet is the actual agreement that we would be entering into this evening. So the first section is our professional services agreement, which has been reviewed and approved by our legal counsel. So they've signed off on it. And then you look at page 22, that's the start of the scope of work with Stantec. So it's a very detailed scope that lists all the tasks and deliverables that they have to provide the agency. There was one comment from Director Dias during the committee meeting, and that's on page 30 of your board packet. It has to do with the trace metals that are going to be collected. Wanted to ensure that it included chromium-6, so we kind of mid-page under trace metals, we added total chromium and hexavalent.
Thank you. Yep.
And then, so that's the scope of work. And then if you look at starting on page 52, is a detail of their fee schedule. So it lists all of the positions that are going to be working on this project by task and estimated number of hours, as well as their hourly rates. And it also lists all of their sub-consultants that they'll be working with. They have a handful of sub-consultants that will be under contract with Stantec. And then beginning on page 63 of your packet is the overall project schedule for their scope of work. So there was a lot of back and forth between staff, AJ, and Stantec to get this to where it is this evening. Everybody feels very comfortable with it. And staff is recommending the board approve this agreement this evening.
Matt, just one question. I just in this on page, that's exhibit A, it says all the recovery wells are gonna be drilled to 1,000 feet. Is that pretty general for our recovery well depth? Or why are they, I mean, that seems like that's pretty deep, but is that the standard, or?
That's not the standard, and it ultimately, this is for, looking at page 8, is that what you're
Yes.
looking?
Yes.
Um,
Like the third, one
So,
point down.
what we envision is there'll probably be a mix of wells at different depths. There'll probably be some wells that are shallower, 500 feet roughly in the upper aquifer, and then deeper wells down to 1,000 feet in the lower aquifer. And we can use those two different wells to blend water quality, to meet the water quality requirements. You kind of have a range of, we realize that we're probably going to have higher production if we go deeper, but then the challenge with that is the water quality is not as good as the upper aquifer. So that's the reason for that. Good question, though. And again, Paul with Kenny Jenks and Joe Long with Stantec are both here this evening. That'd be a good opportunity to meet Joe. He's going to be the point guy for Stantec as program manager or project manager, and occasionally be interacting with the committee and board in the future.
Okay, well, I'll go ahead and move on board order 681, to approve the $3,257,553 for engineering design, hydrology service for the high district Waterbank.
I'll second that.
Is there any further discussion or questions?
I have something. The committee, this thing was, I have to say, probably, it was a long process, because it's really a two process, because we were gonna go another direction originally, and there's certain laws in the state where we have us to do things like this, so then we had to kind of regroup and go over it again, so we had a really good education on this, and then I sat in on one of the interviews when they were going through it, and the way the management team and KJ were asking the questions, they thoroughly went through. They had 3 written questions to all the different agencies that they were interviewing, and so they went through all that, and then after that, they analyzed that discussion for each one of them, like a report card type setup. So it was really done very thoroughly. I've never been, all the years I've been on the board, I've gone through something so detailed as that. So that's one reason why I'm supporting it, but also I believe we have, for this project, the best team, rounded team that's also going to satisfy Net's curiosity as well. So I personally don't believe we're having any issues with water quality. That's just I mean, well, it depends. I mean, it might drop it to 1 part per billion. What are we going to do? Start all over again? I mean, you never know what these people up in Sacramento think.
Or then they just, some of the things are down to trillions now, on some of them, weren't they?
Parts per trillion.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
good.
it's just a,
So that means we were back to 50 parts per billion.
Yes, the lab equipment, continues to improve.
And then, they don't even know what the hell they're even looking at. I mean, that's beside the point. People are drinking this water.
Didn't they close 18 wells down, or 15 wells in Santa Clarita?
Yeah,
That's the
PFAS issue in Tennessee Valley.
How long ago, what was that, a couple of months ago?
Yeah, just recently, they turned off something like 15, 18 wells.
And those wells were okay before?
Well, I mean, the water quality was probably the same, but it's the regulation is driving it.
Regulations for the PFAS, the action level is actually these wells were over the action level, so they turned them off. So they can figure out how to treat it. We're gonna go through a treatment process.
I know that was one of the questions we had for Roseman with their blending.
And there is no treatment method yet for the PFAS?
There is,
There is.
you use, Paul will probably better answer this, but it's probably, like ion exchange type vessels.
Because we're actually working with Santa Cruz Valley on their PFAS treatment projects. We just completed treatment systems for 3 of their wells. We finished design in 3 months so that they can get these wells online by summer. But there are established treatment processes for PFAS. One is GAC, granular activated carbon, ion exchange, that's also viable, and also reverse osmosis. Those are the 3 technologies that are typically being used right now for PFAS treatment.
Is Lawton on board with that, new water, the whole PFAS deal and everything as far as the new numbers? You know, Lawton?
Yeah, this is a water quality issue. It's driven by EBW, and so all the treatment facilities are being permitted and regulated by EBW.
Of those 3 methods of treating for PFAS, which is the most effective and cost-effective measures that you guys would recommend? Say we were to run into that issue, what would you recommend that the agency would use?
It depends. It would likely be either GAC or ion exchange. Reverse osmosis is robust, but it's more expensive. It's very energy intensive, and anything that's on the brine that's generated has concentrated PFAS in it, right? And us kind of with the base, like around here, you don't really have very good disposal options. And so with GAC and ion exchange, it's a matter of how much land you have available to build a treatment system. With GAC, so both of these technologies require vessels where the media is utilized, and the GAC requires about double the amount of vessels that ion exchange does. So that's a consideration. Ion exchange, we require fewer vessels, so there's less capital investment required, but the media regeneration required for it is more expensive, so the annual O&M costs are greater. So a lot of agencies veer towards GAC because the life cycle costs are better.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Paul.
No problem.
Any more questions? Okay, all in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
No, I'm sorry, we don't have everybody on the phone, my mistake.
That's okay. I make that mistake all the time. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Item 6B1, consideration and possible action on adopting resolution number R20-02, establishing an agency purchasing policy.
Yes, I'll be happy to provide this presentation to the board. This is a culmination of several meetings, some special meetings of the Finance Committee to develop the purchasing policy. The purchasing policy was included in your packet, and provide you some somewhat detailed summary and explanation of the purchasing policy, because I know it's not necessarily the most exciting reading. The purpose of the purchasing policy is to ensure purchases are accomplished in a manner that provides the greatest value. We wanted to establish some uniform procedures for acquiring our services and materials and construction activities. And more importantly, is to establish some guidelines for ethical conduct in managing Avek's purchasing activities, and follow purchasing and bidding requirements as required by California law. So it's intended to help both the board and the staff with regard to how we purchase, the procedures that we go through, and how all those things are done. And then that way there's a common understanding and interest that we're doing things that are in a way that is consistent with California law. So one of the most important aspects of the purchasing policy is to provide purchasing authority limits. And that's, just the amount of dollars that a particular person or from the agency has the authority to expend. And for our purchasing policy, it's the general manager and the assistant general manager are the only ones that are authorized to spend up to $25,000 for the various purchasing alternatives that we have. Anything over $25,000 has to be approved by the board of directors. So that's kind of the split of where we make our changes in our procedures. The purchasing policy also delegates certain responsibilities. We can see for the general manager his responsibilities to administrate the policy and ensure that all the purchases are made at the lowest responsible cost and provides the maximum benefit. Department managers need to anticipate the requirements in advance to prevent downtime. They need to provide detailed, accurate specifications consistent with the requirements that they have for the items they intend to purchase or services they tend to want to secure. Prepare a purchase order in accordance with the instructions, in other words, per the financial policy. Notify the GM of any vendor problems so we can make changes. And then minimize emergency and sole source purchases as much as is practical. And then review and reconcile the budget monthly to make sure that they're not overexpending any particular item with a purchase order request. The finance department is responsible for processing invoices and reconciling all the relevant documentation in order to fulfill purchasing policy requirements. So next we want to talk a little bit about the types of purchasing methods that are available. And the first item is kind of a blanket purchase order that's used for routine, reoccurring items such as Edison payments, trash collections, those monthly type payments that come along. And then we have a different type of purchasing method, which is what we call a regular purchasing method. That's when you want to purchase a specific item. And in this case, purchase orders are not required, are required for anything over $1,000 and aren't required for less than $1,000 in the purchase. And a purchase order for an item that's over $1,000 must be issued prior to the purchase and must be signed by the department manager and the general manager. The contract purchase order preferred method for purchasing repetitive items or services. So this is a different type of method, and this is used to secure volume pricing. This would correspond to things like office supplies from Staples, chemicals that we buy, and we do a contract purchase order where we buy certain chemicals in bulk and get them delivered over the course of the year. And what's required by this is that if that contract purchase order exists, each of the departments have to use those services in the said vendor, and you can't go outside of the approval process for those. Check requests, appropriate for the following types of purchases. These are just educational, travel, or mileage reimbursements, operating permits, or approved conference fees. Credit cards purchases are used only for legitimate business type purposes. Personal use is strictly prohibited, and then adheres to the purchase limits restrictions. Sometimes conferences will have something that will go over a particular limit, and these are individual limits for each person with a credit card. And must obtain receipt and explanation for those charges, and developed a cost accounting process for credit card purchases. Contracts. So the approved contracts must have a purchase order issued in the contract amount. Contract payments are made, requested by invoice. Only the GM may sign the contracts, or the assistant GM in my absence. The agency standard contract agreement is used. And if there has to be any changes for any particular reason, that has to be reviewed by legal counsel before that contract can be signed. Contracts must be clear and have a scope of work with a beginning and an end date, and all of that must be approved by the general manager. Oops, what do we do here? Okay. Check preparation, these are some purchasing procedures now. We've gone from purchasing methods to purchasing procedures. All checks that are prepared have to have, bear the signature of two of the following: the GM, the assistant general manager, board secretary, treasurer, board president, or the board vice president. Purchase order change orders. Revised purchase orders must be reapproved for the larger amount by the general manager. Change orders in excess of the GM spending limit authority need board approval, and that change orders are not needed when the costs are the same or lower or within 10% of the original purchase amount. That means there's no new purchase order per se. If it goes over, if a change order goes over the spending limit of the general manager, then it has to go to board no matter what.
We're not gonna have a change order,
Yeah, that's the goal. And emergency and time-sensitive purchases. For these types of purchases, the GM can approve change orders in excess of his or her spending authority. Must promptly discuss with the board president or vice president and present to the board within 1 month for approval. This would be something that would need to be purchased right away in order to get it installed to maintain operating parameters, things like that. And then that's different than, say, emergency purchases, and where you have an emergency of some kind, and the GM is authorized to approve necessary expenditures above his or her authority without the board approval. And this is to address an emergency situation that might come about. And it also is not required to follow comparative bidding or bidding pricing and bidding requirements, but we shall comply with the Public Contract Code 22050, and so it means we must try and get 3 bids, comply with prevailing wage. All of those aspects still apply even during emergency situations. The GS was properly discussed with the board member any type of emergency purchases that may occur. And normally that would be the board president, the vice president, but should the board president or vice president not be available, another board member would be called until we get a discussion. If we had any kind of major kind of emergency or interruption. And then for sole sources, can only be made if needed. Supplies and materials and equipment are of a proprietary nature, and we have quite a bit of those, and are otherwise a specific design, quality construction, that type of thing, and it's only available one source. A lot of this specialty water treatment type equipment, there's a authorized vendor from the manufacturer that has this area. So there really is no other way to get purchases for those types of items. If no alternatives are identified, GM may recommend making such purchases from a sole source, but there's documentation that's required to justify that sole source purchase. Travel expenses, all travel must comply with the personnel policy. The general manager must approve all travel in advance. Itemized receipts for travel must be provided within 1 week. to the finance department, and board member travel policies and procedures are governed by the guidelines of service. They're not included in here. Yes. The board members have a special set of rules and regulations which we are adjusting as in the next several weeks and have it wrapped up for that. Applicability of prevailing wages and maintenance for service work. So most any kind of work that we do that exceeds $1,000 per contractor in any 1 year needs to have prevailing wages. Maintenance service work above $15,000, we have to have contractors that are registered with the Department of Industrial Relations in order to perform the work. So they have that limit. Services, if we have services costing less than $25,000, advance authorization from the general manager or my designee, and a formal agreement for services is necessary. We'll always attempt to receive 3 quotes from various consultants, and GM can make an award based on the lowest quote with the required expertise. Any purchases made without 3 quotes must have a detailed explanation as to why. For services cost, professional services costing between $25,000 and $75,000 requires board approval. The difference here is only three quotes are required. A formal service agreement will be entered into, and the GM or the designee shall not award purchase order contracts costing $25,000 or more, except in the event of emergency or time-sensitive situation. For services costing in excess of $75,000, board director approval is required. Depending on the nature of the services, either a request for proposal or a request for qualification must be prepared. GM is to oversee that process. When pre-qualification is desired, an RFQ will be solicited. The short list of qualified firms will be invited to participate in the RFP process, similar to what we did with the High Desert Waterbank. And when proposals are received, a determination will be made and recommended to the board of directors for the award of the contract. We're coming down to the home stretch here. So public works projects costing less than $25,000. This is actual construction type work. Requires contract and advance authorization from the GM. Best effort must be made to secure 3 bids. Contract review by the department manager and approval by the GM. The contractor and the subcontractors must be registered public works contractors with the Department of Industrial Relations. And once again, once we go over $25,000, board of director approvals is required, awarded to the lowest responsible bidder. And the board may reject any and all bids, and the contractor and subcontractor must be registered with the Department of Industrial Relations. Authorizations for real property. GM has authority to implement real estate transactions subject to board approval to the purchase agreement, and the real estate transaction shall be made in accordance with the current property acquisition process we have approved. Procedures for employee expense reimbursement. All department expenses reimbursements must be authorized by the GM. Expenses must be accompanied by a receipt. All food receipts must be itemized. All missing receipts must be authorized by the GM or the designee. And the GM and board secretary reimbursements must be approved by the board president. And board members' reimbursements shall comply with the guidelines of service. Is that it?
Dwayne, just one question. As far as contracts go, So as long as it's not our standard AVAC contract, if there's any changes to it, legal has to go through it, correct?
Correct,
Okay, good.
yeah. And there's no exception.
No, that's, yeah. I
There's
just wanna
no
make sure
exception.
that- Yeah, unless it's basically our
And
standard contract.
unless it's our approved, pre-approved contract from the attorney, it has to go through the attorney to be approved.
Okay, good. And we didn't have any of this, is this new? We haven't had this type of.
We've had all portions of this. We've never had it all in one place.
No, I don't remember such a matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was always, it was bits and pieces put together. We spent, I can't even tell you how many hours we spent on it, the committee, and then, of course, the staff on this thing, to bring it all together to this point right now.
Yeah.
And the reason why it's so important, the committee said, this is way too important, because it's gonna be a template for the future. We want the whole board to jump in, if they see something, yes, something we got a point that's very valid, and he was able to answer that. There's a change in the contract, the original contract, it has to be looked over again by the attorneys. All these things were addressed during that time. Dollar amounts,
Dollar amounts,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of everything, there's several versions.
I'm not certain.
Yeah, well, no, like all this stuff is just familiar,
No, it's
all
good that
it's
you're
all
asking.
familiar, but it's just, I'm glad that we're putting it all together. I didn't realize that we didn't have this type of template, and I think this is good going forward to have.
And here's another thing about this template we're putting together. Anybody retires, whatever, we don't have to, the manuals will be put together, and then be able to understand it faster and quicker.
Right.
Being brought up to speed, instead of taking shortcuts and verbally tell them something, and don't get it, so.
Black
Yes.
and white.
Yeah.
And new employees come on, they understand what the procedures are, and they can follow them, and then ask follow-up questions as necessary, but it really helps.
Your dad was under 40 years, I don't know, so over 30-some years, but, we're doing, 100 times more projects today.
Oh, yeah.
More than we ever did back in those days, so it was not easy, but today it's very complicated.
Well, the growth has been substantial too, compared to what it was, back when he was first put on the board,
Well, that's what I'm saying, yeah, he
He was on, the AVAC, he used to talk about when it was on Lancaster Boulevard.
Yeah, at a coffee shop.
Yeah.
But here's another thing too, because of the state screwed thing, back with the Clean Water Act, it screwed up so many things, we're going from 50 parts, per billion, down to 10 parts, because you had to completely redraw the whole schematic of the whole system. How many years between core means
Yeah, I
and
know.
GAC?
Yeah.
As I said, I was making a joke, but we're 10 parts now. In fact, somebody else does something, says we want to have 1 or 2 parts, we got a problem. we don't know what's gonna happen.
That's what, that's why you try and keep up on the regulatory process, and you have these trade organizations that are supposed to be looking out for you and helping you and letting you know when things are gonna be an issue with you, and that's why we have a legislative advocate on our side.
Yeah, somebody in Sacramento that
Yeah,
keeps
yeah.
us updated with
Right.
law changes and policy changes that
Yeah.
affect our operations.
Yeah, I was just reviewing legislative laws that have all been introduced in the last couple of weeks, and, there's probably 40 of them that have to do with water alone. So, it's something that we have to deal with along with everything else. The easy part's actually trading water and delivering it to the customers. It's the hard part's everything else.
We don't need bonds, we need farmers.
Yes.
That's where the water needs to go to the farmers.
Right.
Bonds, we don't need bonds.
Mhm.
Speaking of that, Dwayne, did Trump get the farmers more water?
It's yet to be determined whether the farmers are going to get any water. He did sign the record of decision that is which put into effect the BIOPS of 2020. Those biological opinions are now in effect. And they do provide greater opportunity in, under certain circumstances, to export more water across the Delta. And that's primarily due to the use of what we've learned science-wise from 2008 to 2020 to better manage the fish populations and using real time. And what the old BIOPS had was, by this date you do this, by this date you do this, irregardless if it has any positive effect for the fish. So this process is we can go to here because there's no real problem, or it gives you a little more flexibility as to how the system can be operated based on what the observed observations are of the Delta.
So Gary, it gives you an opportunity in July when we know we're going to get water, you can hear the grinding of the fish going to the pump. The thing is, I don't understand how lawns outweigh food. I mean, you know, I mean, it's crazy, you know? There's plenty of water, it's just not managed correctly. Ready?
I make a motion to adopt resolution number R-20-02, establishing an agency purchasing policy as presented and recommended by the Finance Committee and staff.
Second.
Are there any more questions or discussion?
I'll just say I appreciate the time and energy you've spent on that. And it's great to see.
You have put in an incredible amount of effort.
If I could ask maybe to refer to resolution R-20-02 as part of that. Oh, never mind. Never mind. You did right.
I'm sorry.
You did perfect.
Okay.
My mistake.
Any more discussion? All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you. Item 7, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you very much.